If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with your friends and family helps spread knowledge. And when we help others grow, we grow too. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive into the podcast. Origins of hidden power networks in the early 20th century. The year was 1917, and something strange was happening in Russia. While crowds filled the streets demanding change, whispers spread about invisible hands guiding events from the shadows. People spoke in hushed voices about secret meetings and coded messages that seemed to shape the fate of an empire. In the chaos of revolution, questions arose that had no easy answers. Who really controlled the decisions being made? Were the leaders truly in charge? Or were others pulling the strings from hidden places? These questions would haunt the world for decades to come. As the old government crumbled, many noticed how certain groups seemed to know what would happen next. They moved with purpose while everyone else stumbled in confusion. Some called it planning, others whispered about something much darker. The pattern repeated in other lands. In Germany during the 1930s, leaders spoke of hidden enemies within their own borders. They claimed secret conspirators were working to destroy the nation from inside. Fear of these invisible threats gave them power to act without rules or limits. New organizations emerged from this fear. Groups like the Gestapo appeared, operating in ways that ordinary police never could. They answered to no courts. They followed no laws except their own. Citizens began to wonder if their government was really one thing on the surface and something entirely different underneath. Turkey gave this mystery a name. They called it the Deep State, Derin Devlet, in their language. For generations, Turkish people had watched as military leaders, intelligence officers, and government workers seemed to make decisions that regular officials never announced. These shadow networks acted on their own, pursuing goals that ordinary citizens could barely understand. The Turkish experience was not unique. Across the world, people noticed the same pattern. Official governments made speeches and signed papers, but real power seemed to flow through channels that nobody could see or track. These early fears created something lasting. They planted seeds of doubt that would grow for generations. When people saw government secrecy, they remembered the stories of hidden controllers. When military leaders acted without explanation, old questions resurfaced. The foundation was set. What began as whispers during times of crisis became a framework for understanding power itself. People learned to look beyond what they were told to see. They started asking who really made the decisions that shaped their lives. These questions would echo through the century, creating new stories and feeding ancient suspicions about the true nature of power. Cold War, espionage, and covert influence. The year was 1953. Most Americans were going about their daily lives, unaware that their government had just toppled another nation's leader. In Iran, the CIA orchestrated a coup that removed Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh from power. The operation happened in shadows, with no public vote or congressional debate. This was not an isolated event. It was part of something much bigger brewing in the halls of power. During the Cold War, intelligence agencies grew into massive organizations with budgets that dwarfed entire government departments. The CIA, born just 6 years after World War II ended, quickly became a force that operated beyond normal oversight. They ran secret missions across the globe, while elected officials sometimes learned about them only after the fact. The same pattern emerged in Moscow. The KGB wielded enormous influence over Soviet policy, often making decisions that even high-ranking party members knew nothing about. These spy agencies had become states within states. But the real mystery lay in how these organizations seemed to develop their own agendas. Take MK Ultra, the CIA's mind control program. For over 2 decades, They conducted experiments on unwitting subjects using drugs, torture, and psychological manipulation. The program violated every ethical boundary, yet it continued with minimal oversight. Documents later revealed that CIA directors sometimes kept operations secret even from presidents. This raised troubling questions about who really controlled foreign policy. Meanwhile, defense contractors were making fortunes from the arms race. Companies like Lockheed Martin and Boeing developed close relationships with Pentagon officials. Former generals would retire and immediately join these firms as executives. The revolving door spun constantly. President Eisenhower warned about this in his farewell address, calling it the military-industrial complex. He feared that this network of defense companies, military leaders, and politicians might gain uncontrollable influence over government decisions. His fears proved justified. By the 1960s, this complex had grown so powerful that it could effectively pressure politicians into approving weapons programs and military interventions. The Vietnam War became a testing ground for this dynamic, as defense profits soared while casualties mounted. Secret armies also emerged during this era. NATO created covert units across Europe, ostensibly to resist Soviet invasion. But these groups, known as Gladio operations, sometimes interfered in domestic politics. They were accountable to no elected government, yet they possessed significant power. These revelations changed how people viewed their governments. The line between legitimate state security and shadow manipulation had become hopelessly blurred. What had started as necessary Cold War measures had evolved into something more disturbing: permanent networks operating beyond democratic control. The deep state concept in modern U.S. politics. The year was 2013, and America was about to learn a name that would change everything. Edward Snowden sat in a Hong Kong hotel room, holding secrets that would shake the government to its core. What he revealed made people wonder, who really runs the country? Snowden showed the world that government agencies had been watching citizens for years. Phone calls, emails, messages, all of it stored away in massive computers. The NSA had built a system so big and hidden that even some politicians didn't know it existed. This wasn't the first time Americans questioned what happens in the shadows. Back in the 1950s, whispers began about a deep state. The phrase came from Turkey, where people spoke of hidden forces controlling their government from behind closed doors. By the 1990s, American writers started using the same words to describe their own concerns. But it was during the Obama years that these worries grew louder. Intelligence agencies seemed to operate by their own rules. They had budgets Congress barely understood. They made decisions that affected millions of people, yet their meetings remained secret. Then came 2016, and everything exploded. The FBI was investigating both political parties. Hillary Clinton's emails sat under examination while questions swirled around Donald Trump's connections to Russia. Americans watched as their most powerful law enforcement agency seemed to be playing politics. When Trump won the presidency, he brought these fears into the open. He spoke constantly about a deep state working against him. Every leaked story, every investigation, every critical report, he blamed on hidden enemies within the government itself. Former FBI Director James Comey found himself at the center of this storm. His decisions during the election drew fire from both sides. When Trump fired him in 2017, it felt like proof to many that something deeper was happening. Intelligence officials who had served for decades suddenly found themselves called traitors. Career professionals who thought they were protecting America were accused of plotting against it. The line between patriotism and conspiracy became blurred. Documents began surfacing through Freedom of Information Act requests. Journalists dug deeper into classified programs. Each revelation fed the growing suspicion that voters weren't really in control. The 2020 election brought these tensions to a breaking point. Claims of fraud mixed with accusations of deep state interference. Social media amplified every theory, every suspicion, every fear. What had started as whispered concerns about government overreach had become a central theme in American politics. The question was no longer whether hidden forces existed. It was about what they were really doing. Documented deep state networks beyond the U.S. The shadows cast by hidden power structures stretch far beyond American borders. In dusty courtrooms and secret government files across continents, investigators have found something chilling. They discovered networks that operated in the dark spaces between official government and complete chaos. Turkey's story begins with whispered names in coffee shops and disappeared journalists. Former soldiers spoke quietly about GTEM, a unit that officially never existed. Yet court documents tell a different story. Witnesses testified about political killings carried out by men with no names. These weren't random crimes. They followed patterns. Opposition leaders died. Journalists asking hard questions vanished. The evidence pointed to something organized and systematic. European investigators made an even stranger discovery in dusty NATO archives. Operation Gladio had been hiding in plain sight for decades. This secret army was supposed to fight Soviet invasion, but documents showed something else entirely. Bombings in Italian train stations, political chaos in Belgium, terror attacks that pushed citizens toward authoritarian leaders. The fingerprints were everywhere once investigators knew where to look. Latin America holds perhaps the darkest secrets. Chile's military kept detailed records of their shadow operations. Argentina's generals documented their methods. These weren't rogue soldiers acting alone. They were part of coordinated networks that spanned borders. Phone records connected assassination teams across countries. Banking documents revealed shared funding sources. What makes these cases different from conspiracy theories? The evidence. Court testimonies from actual participants. Government documents released through Freedom of Information laws. Banking records that trace money flows. Phone intercepts that reveal coordination between groups thousands of miles apart. In Turkey, prosecutors built cases using internal military communications. European investigators found training manuals that detailed psychological warfare tactics. Latin American truth commissions gathered thousands of witness statements that painted a consistent picture of organized shadow control. The pattern emerges clearly across continents. Official government structures existed alongside unofficial ones. These shadow networks shared tactics, training, and sometimes funding. They influenced elections through fear. They silenced opposition through violence. They operated with impunity because they existed in the gray spaces where official accountability disappeared. Former intelligence officers have broken their silence in protected testimony. Their stories match across countries and decades. They describe parallel command structures that answered to no elected officials. They detail operations designed to manipulate public opinion and political outcomes. These revelations transform abstract theories into concrete reality. The deep state isn't just an American phenomenon. It's a pattern that emerges wherever powerful interests need to operate beyond democratic oversight. The evidence sits in court records, waiting for those brave enough to read between the classified lines. Deep state conspiracies in the 21st century's global events. The morning of September 11, 2001, changed everything. As towers fell and questions arose, people began asking harder questions about what their governments really knew. The official investigations that followed left gaps. Witnesses spoke of strange details that never made it into final reports. Years later, intelligence analysts would quietly admit they had warnings. Phone calls were intercepted. Suspicious activities were tracked. Yet somehow, the attacks still happened. Former FBI agents began speaking out about roadblocks in their investigations. They described how certain leads were mysteriously shut down. But the real shock came in 2013. A young computer specialist named Edward Snowden walked out of his secure job with a laptop full of secrets. What he revealed stunned the world. The government was watching everyone. Phone calls, emails, internet searches, all collected and stored in massive databases. The documents Snowden leaked showed programs with code names like Prism and X-Keyscore. These systems could read your messages in real time. They could track where you went and who you talked to. Most people had no idea this was happening. Then came the election stories that sounded like spy novels. Russian hackers broke into Democratic Party computers in 2016. They stole thousands of emails and released them at strategic moments. Social media companies discovered fake accounts spreading false information to millions of Americans. Intelligence agencies published detailed reports about these attacks. They traced the hackers back to specific buildings in Moscow. They identified the fake accounts and the people who created them. This wasn't theory anymore, it was documented fact. Similar operations appeared in other countries. Brexit votes in Britain faced foreign manipulation. French elections dealt with coordinated disinformation campaigns. The techniques were always similar: hack, leak, and spread confusion through fake social media accounts. Former CIA officers began talking about things they never discussed before. They described operations where American agents interfered in foreign elections. They admitted to activities that mirror exactly what happened to the United States. These revelations created an uncomfortable truth. Secret operations that people once dismissed as conspiracy theories were now proven facts. Government agencies really did have powers that most citizens never imagined. Foreign nations really were manipulating elections through cyber warfare. The evidence sits in congressional reports and court documents. Intelligence agencies have confirmed these activities in official testimonies. What once seemed impossible is now part of the historical record. The hidden world of state secrets had finally become visible. The ongoing mystery and its impact on society. Something strange happens when people start whispering about hidden powers. The whispers spread. They grow louder. Soon, entire nations find themselves asking questions they never asked before. In Turkey, President Erdogan spoke of a deep state after a failed military coup in 2016. He pointed to hidden networks, secret groups working against his government. The people listened. Many believed him. What happened next changed everything. Erdogan used these fears to reshape his country. He arrested thousands of judges, teachers, and journalists. He said they were part of the conspiracy. The public supported him because they feared the hidden enemy more than they feared losing their freedoms. This pattern repeats across the world. Leaders discover that deep state claims are powerful weapons. They can use them to explain away failures, to silence critics, to demand more power for protection. But the weapon cuts both ways. Once people believe hidden forces control their government, they stop trusting everything. Elections feel meaningless if shadowy figures pick the real winners. Laws seem fake if secret groups write the real rules. In America, polling shows that most citizens now believe a deep state exists. Some see it as protection against dangerous politicians. Others view it as a threat to democracy itself. Both sides agree on one thing: their votes might not matter as much as they thought. The mystery creates a terrible problem. How can a democracy work when citizens doubt everything their government does? How can officials make hard decisions when people assume the worst about their motives? Government agencies face an impossible choice. They must keep some secrets to protect national security, But secrecy feeds suspicion. Every classified document becomes proof of conspiracy. Every closed meeting sparks new theories. The cycle continues. More secrecy creates more doubt. More doubt demands more answers. But the answers often reveal real secrets that were better left hidden. The public learns that their government does spy on citizens, does work with foreign agents, does lie about military operations. These revelations prove that some conspiracies are real. If small conspiracies exist, people wonder, why not bigger ones? The line between healthy skepticism and harmful paranoia blurs. Social media makes everything worse. False stories spread as fast as true ones. People choose which deep state theory fits their beliefs. They reject evidence that challenges their chosen narrative. Democracy depends on shared facts, but deep state claims destroy that foundation. Citizens cannot agree on basic truths about how their government works. They cannot hold leaders accountable when they cannot agree on what those leaders actually do. The mystery remains unsolved. Hidden power structures may or may not exist as described, but their impact on society grows stronger every day.